Welcome to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms. A prudent investor doesn't just buy property, but considers building a robust portfolio. And with the markets at all-time highs, it's a little hard to navigate right now. Well, today on the show, we have one of the top 20 living economists with us who will shine some light on portfolio allocation and what's next for the markets on the Real Estate Guys radio program. All aboard! Registration is open for the Real Estate Guys 22nd Annual Investor Summit. Imagine spending more than a week with like-minded investors, world-class educators, and real-world professionals. Returning in 2024 is the editor of the Gold newsletter, Brian London, real estate developer Beth Clifford, and the rebel capitalist George Gammon. Back with us in 2024, sales legend and best-selling author Tom Hopkins. And joining us live and in person for his 12th Investor Summit, Ken McElroy. Plus 2 brand new faculty members we can't even mention yet, and a lot more. It all begins June 13th in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Visit investorsummitatc.com to get all the details and reserve your spot. This transformational week is like no conference you've ever attended. Go to investorsummitatc.com and make plans to spend a week with the Real Estate Guys, Ken McElroy, Tom Hopkins, and an all-star faculty on the 22nd Annual Investor Summit at Sea. Welcome to the Real Estate Guys radio show. I'm your host, Robert Helms. We love investing in real estate, and of course, there's lots of different ways to do that. Some folks get rich in a niche. They pick a market or a couple of markets, and they have most of their holdings there, which can make some sense because you build up a team and a knowledge base. You understand what's happening locally and even regionally. But the other side of the equation is to diversify into the types of properties that you buy, the markets you invest in, the amount of time you hold properties even, and what we might call your risk assessment. And that is that some property is just a little more inherently risky. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but you ought to look at the risk-adjusted returns. And stepping back from just real estate, most of us build a portfolio, and I will tell you that I have always been overweighted in real estate, but I've also learned from a bunch of great investors who have excellent techniques and strategies to make sure their portfolio can hang in there kind of no matter what happens. The greatest thing about buy and hold real estate is that somebody else makes the mortgage payment. And if you do it right, they keep doing that until the mortgage gets paid off and the rent is continuing to go higher and the property's worth more. But that is a slow way to get wealthy. So obviously, the sooner you start, the better. But what about the other asset classes? Last week, we had George Gammon on the program, and we talked about volatility. That affects the stock market, the bond market, the metals market, and certainly the real estate market. Well, today we're going to talk to a former analyst for the Central Intelligence Agency. He's currently the Doty Spogley Endowed Chair of Free Enterprise at Chapman University. He's been a teacher for a lot of years. For the last 44 years, he's been the editor and author of Forecasts and Strategies, a newsletter focused on investment, and I would say primarily on stock investing. Although, as you learned today, he does believe in diversity. He's authored more than 25 books, including The Making of Modern Economics, Investing in One Lesson, and The Maxims of Wall Street. When we come back, you'll meet one of the top 20 living economists. Our friend Dr. Mark Skousen is back on the Real Estate Guys radio program.
Hi, I'm G. Edward Griffin, author of The Creature from Jekyll Island, a second look at the Federal Reserve. And you're listening to The Real Estate Guys.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio program, now in our 28th year of broadcast, which sounds like a long time until you realize that our guest today has been writing an awesome newsletter called Forecasts and Strategies for nearly 50 years. Please welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio program our good friend and America's economist, Dr. Mark Skousen. Hey, Mark.
Robert, it's great to be with you and been on your program, and it's just a pleasure to be back on. And as far as my newsletter is concerned, I did start writing Forecasts and Strategies since 1980. But you're right, it's been 50 years. I started as the managing editor of the Inflation Survival Letter in 1974, so that would have been 50 years ago. That was my introduction to the financial world. I was working on a PhD in economics at the CIA, and then I changed positions to work for Bob Kephart the publisher of Human Events and also the publisher of this exciting new alternative press called the Inflation Survival Letter, which is what we called the hard money newsletters. And it's just been a great ride. What's exciting is that the financial markets are different and exciting every day. That's different than teaching economics or accounting or, some of these areas that don't really change very much from day to day. But the markets, you wake up every morning and something's different.
Well, it's so true. And keeping your pulse on all that has been something. Last year on the show, we had you on about a year ago, and you said a couple of things. You said the stock market still has room to run. And you also said for the first time in quite a few years, it might be time to think about buying some precious metals. And both of those things have turned out to be pretty true.
Yeah, we really, stock market's been great. And I don't think we've had much of a down period since 2020. It's just been moving steadily higher and higher for a variety of reasons. But the fact that it continues to rise in the face of tight money was a bit of a surprise. 2022 was the last really kind of bear market that we had. And as far as gold is concerned, our patience has finally paid off. And that's the thing about gold. You have to be very patient because you can have a 10-year drought in gold. I don't know how many times gold hit $2,000 an ounce and then dropped back, up, then back, up and back. And that's really frustrating for any of us in this business. But now it's at 2,400. And I mean, my gosh, once it took off, once it broke out that support level, as the technicians refer to, it has just gone higher. And finally, the gold stocks are coming alive. And the silver's at $28 an ounce. So silver has hit $50 an ounce, I think 3 times in its history. So we'll see if that finally, I hope not, because I love buying the silver dollars. I always carry with me an American Eagle silver dollar with me. And that's kind of my symbol, and the symbol at FreedomFest as well, a symbol of liberty and sound money. And these coins right now, 1 ounce American Eagle silver dollars minted every year. I give them out to my students who take my course at Chapman University, and they're probably $35, $40 now. There's a huge premium on these coins, far higher than the gold price. But yeah, I think gold and silver are rising because not so much the weak dollar. The dollar has not been particularly weak, but I just think it's time. In other words, we've seen the stock market and technology hit all-time highs. We've seen Bitcoin hit all-time highs. And finally, I think it's gold's turn to hit all-time highs. And I understand there's a lot of central bank buying and stuff like that. But once an investment gets into a momentum stage, the trend is your friend until it ends. We don't know. I think it's just kind of beginning for gold and silver. So we're recommending it in both my newsletter and my trading services, and we're doing very well.
Hey, Mark, I wanted to ask you about an op-ed piece that you had in the Wall Street Journal last week on April 4th about the signaling of a recession, where you talk specifically about the difference between GDP, which we're used to talking about, and gross output. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, that's just kind of my signature contribution to macroeconomics. And so I've been writing about it ever since 1990. I came out with a book called The Structure of Production, which is kind of an Austrian view, actually a businessman's view of the world, that all goods and services go through stages of production, from the earliest mining stage, resource stage, through manufacturing, and then distribution, and then it reaches the final consumer. What a lot of people don't know is that GDP only measures final output. It's all the goods and services that we can actually use, like the clothing, the cell phones, the hats, the microphone. Okay, all that's in GDP. But we really know that the supply chain is extremely important. And without the supply chain, you don't have the final products. And GDP leaves out the value of the supply chain. They just have value added rather than the total cost of producing these products. So gross output, GO, measures spending at all stages of production. So my Wall Street Journal, this is the fourth time the Wall Street Journal has published an article on gross output, because since 2014, the federal government, that is the Bureau of Economic Analysis, the BEA, puts out GDP data every quarter. Well, they're now putting out gross output every quarter, and it's double the size of GDP, and it's much more volatile because it includes the supply chain. And what's interesting is that the supply chain, which I measures the B2B index, that is the business spending index, it's actually been flat, if not declining, for the last 6 quarters. So this suggests to me the possibility, even though consumer spending and government spending continues to go up, business spending is not. And that's a danger sign that we may be entering a recession in 2024. So that was my article that the Wall Street Journal published, and it created quite a bit of comments. Well, everybody's been predicting a recession for a long period of time, but this is real data. It certainly suggests a slowdown and maybe even a recession. The Biden administration ignores GO because they want everything to look rosy for their reelection, but GO and the B2B spending, business spending, suggests otherwise. People can go to grossoutput.com. That's my website on GO. And I put out a press release every quarter on what GO is doing compared to GDP. So in finance, we all talk about top line and bottom line, sales at the top line and earnings at the bottom line and national. And now we have the same thing in economics. We have a top line gross output and the bottom line GDP. And they're both going up. It's just that GO is not going up as much as GDP. And it's a sign that we could be in a slowdown or a recession.
Hey, Mark, we'd be remiss if we didn't visit a little bit about real estate. I know you have some thoughts about that. We've been talking on this program about inventory being low, obviously interest rates high. What are your thoughts on the real estate industry and the real estate markets right now?
I guess in a lot of ways, we can use that as an example also of hitting all-time highs. Certainly, I have a home in Florida and a home in California, sea to sea, Disney World, Disneyland, and both of them are hitting record prices higher. And a lot of people ask me, well, how can real estate prices keep going up given the mortgage rates have doubled, more than doubled in some cases? They're at 6-7% now. They used to be 3%. And I give two reasons. One is, of course, if you do sell and you have to repurchase, you go from a 3% rate to a 6% rate on the mortgages. And so people are reluctant to sell. So that's why inventory is so low. And the second reason is taxes. You know, there was a time period where you could buy, as long as you bought a house that was worth more than what you sold for, you didn't have to pay any tax. Then they changed the law where now you only, if you're a single person, $250,000 exempt from capital gains tax, or $500,000 if you're married. Yep. But a lot of homes are selling way beyond that. And this is money that if you get up and move somewhere, you're going to pay a substantial tax because your real estate's going to be beyond that exemption. So I think a lot of people are reluctant to sell. Plus, you can, even if you get another job, you can often work from your own home. And so stay-at-home business is really booming with the internet and Zoom and Google Meet and all this sort of thing. So this is why I think people are moving less for tax reasons. They're not going to do it. And they don't have to move for their job. So I give 2 or 3 reasons why we're seeing what we do. I don't know if you agree with me on these things, but it seems like that's what's going on.
Yep.
One other thing about the real estate market, though, is that if you do move, your real estate taxes will also go up rather dramatically in California and some other states because they have limits on how high real estate taxes can go per year, like it's 1%. in California. So that's another reason you would be reluctant to move, because real estate taxes can go through the roof.
Yeah, no, I want to get your take on that. I definitely concur. I think that, the thing about real estate, it's all markets are local, but there is the trend of the interest rates that affects everybody. And what we've seen, of course, is that people are reluctant. The typical move up buyer, right? They have another kid, they're doing better financially, so they want to move to a little nicer neighborhood, get one more bedroom. Well, when your interest rate on your current house is at 3.5 and the new house is double that, you think twice. The asset can be the mortgage as much as it is the real estate. So the big question, of course, people have been anticipating that the Fed's going to lower rates. And even though that isn't directly the mortgage rate that they're lending, it certainly influences that. And now the Fed's just come out and said, well, maybe not. What are you thinking there? I know you pay attention to what the Fed does.
Yeah, as far as the Fed policy is concerned, they're hinting pretty heavily that there's trouble sometime down the road, whether it's a banking crisis because of, commercial banks are in a difficult situation when they've loaned money to finance these leases on commercial property in the big cities, and half the buildings are empty.
Excellent point.
Because of the COVID and work at home and that sort of thing. So there is a concern of a possible banking crisis that could occur down the road. And the other reason is that I think that GO and B2B spending, that slowdown suggests maybe we could be entering a recession, and they want to act in expectation of the recession of lowering rates. The Fed has traditionally overplayed its hand, both sides. They're easy money for too long, and then they're tight money for too long. So I think Jay Powell's trying to break that cycle, and it's really difficult because inflation is so difficult to control. Once it gets out of the bag, so to speak, it's really hard to put it back in. Friedrich Hayek, the Austrian economist, said inflation is a tiger by the tail, and it's really hard to, once it gets going, it's really hard to contain. And I think we've demonstrated that. And there's two reasons for the inflation. One is the huge increase in the money supply in 2020. And then the other is the Biden administration is just spending money like water, and the deficits keep growing. And Biden keeps violating the Supreme Court ruling by giving away student loans and not having students don't have to pay for it. I mean, he's just buying votes with that kind of stuff. And it's really irritating that we're seeing a president of the United States do this kind of thing without going through Congress. It's very undemocratic. Anytime a president constantly uses executive orders, that's not a good sign. We set up the Constitution so that there were limits to the power of the executive, and this is a violation of that.
Boy, it sure is. And, inflation is that insidious tax that when it moves along at 2 or 3%, you may not notice from day to day, week to week. But now I'll tell you what, not only are we all paying attention, but in the real estate world, our tenants are noticing that gas is more expensive and groceries are more expensive and all of that. And that does affect pretty much every decision. And then you have energy, which is baked into everything that moves. And energy's been pretty strong. What do you think about the energy sector? And is there a way that you like to invest in that, Mark?
Yes, I'm very bullish on the energy sector, fossil fuels. I'm not so much on alternative energy because it has to be so heavily subsidized by the government. And despite every effort by the Biden administration to destroy the fossil fuel business, the fact is that the amount of oil in inventory is at a low area, and prices are steadily moving higher. Gasoline prices are up $1 here in California just in the last month. They were in $4.25 range. Now they're in $5.25 range. I think that's happening across the country, although California has higher sales tax on our gasoline tax, and that's the reason for the higher price.
Yep.
So I'm quite bullish on the energy sector, and we've made quite a bit of money in the pipeline stocks and oil and gas companies We're up by double digits on that this year. And I don't see that trend ending at all. One of the things that I have a great chart that I show my students and I show at investment conferences, and it's a chart showing the CPI inflation since our founding of our country in 1776.
Yeah.
And it shows inflation coming up and down and not really moving that much. And the only reason it goes up is because of wars. The Civil War and World War I, World War II, you always see inflation moving up. And then it comes back down after the end of the war. After World War II, everything changed. Then you see a sharp rise and it never goes down. So we've entered an era of permanent inflation. And we as investors need to keep this in mind, whether you're investing in real estate or in stocks and bonds and gold and so on. Inflation is here to stay. And despite all the rhetoric that we're fighting inflation, they're just trying to reduce the growth in the inflation rate, trying to get it down to 2%, not down to zero, not down to negative. But so that means we've entered an era of permanent inflation. This is my hypothesis. And you just have to keep that in mind. And stocks for the long run are actually a very good inflation hedge. Real estate over the long term is a very good inflation hedge. Gold is gold and silver. But there are periods where these values go down. There are recessions. There are periods where hard assets do decline in price. So you have to be patient with this. I was looking at, I don't know if you know Jeffrey Hirsch, the stock trader almanac. He and his father, Yale, developed this 500, the Dow 500 super cycle. And it said after every war that causes inflation, once the war is over, the stock market at some point will start taking off and the Dow will go up 500% in their super cycle. And real estate's the same way. And all of these different assets do have these super cycles. So I'm going to publish that in my next issue of my newsletter. And I show these charts, the permanent inflation charts, the super cycle charts. There's lots of charts are worth 10,000 words, right?
I'm thinking, Mark, that maybe 50 years later, it's time to reintroduce the inflation survival newsletter.
That's true. It's funny. In 1980, Bob Kephart changed the name to personal finance, or rather establishment title, personal finance. Yeah. I don't think it's even published anymore. I think it was bought out. But you're right. Inflation survival letter makes sense. And it makes sense permanently because we have the permanent inflation idea. So that's a good idea. Maybe I'll start it up again.
Our guest today is Dr. Mark Skousen, one of the 20 top living economists. We'll have more to talk with Mark about when we come back, and we'll play real estate trivia next. You're tuned to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms.
Need help with your real estate investment portfolio? Check out the resources page at realestateguysradio.com.
Hey, it's Robert Helms. Thanks so much for listening to the show today. I want to personally invite you to come see an amazing real estate market that combines excellent cash flow, offshore diversification, and what we affectionately call lifestyle investing. Come join me from July 19th to the 22nd in the beautiful country of Belize. The Real Estate Guys have been bringing investors to Belize for more than 18 years now, and our discovery trip is designed to show you the market like nobody else can. Sure, Belize is breathtakingly beautiful. The people are wonderful. And wait till you taste the food. But the real opportunity is the real estate investment potential. There's all kinds of opportunity in Belize when it comes to real estate, including both long and short-term rentals, commercial and retail triple net properties, business opportunities, land acquisition, development, agriculture, and more. And as the only country in Latin America with English as its official language, it's easy to understand the law. Property rights are strong, and contracts are in English. And in the top tourist market, a unique situation exists where demand for rentals continues to outstrip supply, creating a compelling environment for investors. So come see for yourself. Join me July 19th to 22nd in Ambergris Caye, Belize, as we study the market, learn about the sustainable drivers, and tour lots of beautiful real estate. And like all of our field trips, there are no properties for sale during the weekend. Rather, you'll meet lots of local providers that will help educate you about the market so that you can follow up with them after the trip if the market is interesting to you. You've heard about Belize on the Real Estate Guys for all these years. Now come see what all the excitement is about. Plus, we'll have lots of time over meals and activities to talk about all things real estate. To get the details, go to the website at realestateguysradio.com and click on Events, where you'll find the Belize Discovery Trip. Once you register, you'll get information about our group hotel rates as well as travel details. So join me in Belize, July 19th to 22nd. It's a beautiful country with lots of amazing possibilities, and the only thing missing is you. Go to realestateguysradio.com under Events, and I look forward to seeing you in beautiful Belize.
Hey, this is Phil Collin from Def Leppard and Delta Deep. You're listening to The Real Estate Guys.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio program. Thanks for tuning into the show. Hey, come join us on the 22nd Annual Investors Summit at Sea. It is shaping up to be an extraordinary event. It always is. But this year, my goodness, Ken McElroy, George Gammon, Peter Schiff, Tom Hopkins, CPA Tom Wheelwright, and lots more amazing faculty. We're going to be on a brand new, beautiful cruise ship. We'll head to Aruba, Bonaire, Curacao. One of the most amazing events you will ever attend. To get signed up, send an email to summit@realestateguysradio.com. Summit@realestateguysradio.com. We're talking with Dr. Mark Skousen today about what's happening in the markets and how you might allocate your portfolio in consideration of that. Before we get back to the interview, it's time to play Real Estate Trivia. Your chance to win a prize by knowing today's Real Estate Trivia question. When you hear the question and think you know the answer, send your best guess to trivia@realestateguysradio.com. Trivia@realestateguysradio.com. Give us your name, the answer to the question, and your physical mailing address. The first person that gets it right gets an autographed copy of Dr. Skousen's awesome book, The Maxims of Wall Street. That can be yours if you know today's real estate trivia question. Last week on the show, we had a great discussion with George Gammon. We asked this. George lives in Medellin, Colombia most of the time. The question was, where did the name Colombia originate? Well, the name was derived from the last name of the Italian navigator Christopher Columbus. It was conceived as a reference to all of the New World, but the name was later adopted by the Republic of Colombia, formed from the territories of the old Viceroyalty of New Granada, which is modern-day Colombia, Panama, Venezuela, Ecuador, and parts of Brazil. Here's our real estate trivia question for this week. One of the things I haven't told you about Mark Skousen is he's a direct descendant of Benjamin Franklin. Most people know Ben Franklin for his work in the great state of Pennsylvania. We do have to make this a real estate trivia question. But he also served as the U.S. ambassador to 2 different countries. Which ones? Yeah, which 2 countries did Benjamin Franklin serve as U.S. ambassador to? If you think you know, or just want to guess, send your best guess to trivia@realestateguysradio.com. Trivia@realestateguysradio.com. Give us your name, the answer to the question, and your physical mailing address. The first person that gets it right is going to get a personalized copy of the 10th edition of the Maxims of Wall Street, signed by Dr. Mark Skousen. That's today's real estate trivia question. We're with the author of that awesome book. It's the 10th edition now of the Maxims of Wall Street. And Mark, I remember many years ago when this book came out and you had all these great little quotes and quips and all of that. And this book almost has a life of its own.
Indeed, it does. It's funny. I published the first edition of the Maxims of Wall Street in 2011. It's not a book you find in the bookstores. I sell it all by mail because I went to Wiley and Company, the book publisher Wiley that publishes many financial books, classics. And I said, and they'd published some of my books before. And I said, listen, would you like to publish the Maxims of Wall Street, a collection of all these sayings on Wall Street, like sell in May, go away and don't come back till Labor Day. Yeah. And it's got a lot of great humor in it and little short stories and stuff. How about that? And they said, Mark, we're going to say no to your book because quote books don't sell and gift books don't sell. Well, I've sold almost 50,000 copies and gone through 10 editions since then. So I like to call them up during Christmas time and remind them of their short-sightedness. But the book is really fun because I quote all the great Jesse Livermore and Warren Buffett and Jack Bogle and Joe Kennedy. They're all of these great people who have these one-liners that can be very effective. Like, nobody is more bearish than a sold-out bull. You have to think about that one. That's a pretty good one. Or bears make headlines, bulls make money. That's actually the subtitle of my book. So if people are interested, one person got the book for free, right? But if others are interested in my book, it's available at skousenbooks.com. That's Skousen, skousenbooks.com. And I sell it at a discount for $21. And if people buy more than one copy, because it is a gift book, they get it for $11 each after they buy the first one. So it's people buy multiple copies all the time, and I number them, I autograph them. And, you've seen me do the autograph sessions at the Money Show and FreedomFest and Investment U and so forth. So a lot of people put it on their nightstand and read a few pages before they go to bed. There's a lot of really interesting, great books. I'll give you another great quote to show you about some of the humor in the book. How do you make $1 million? Well, you start with 2 million. That's an old commodity joke. Forbes magazine said, how do you make $1 million? Marry a millionaire, or better yet, divorce one. And then Jack Miller's best quote is, how do you become a millionaire? Borrow $1 million and pay it off. And that's what a real estate investment is when you have a mortgage. So there's lots of really good quotes in there. It was a fun book to compile and have short stories and things like that. Maxims of Wall Street.
Mark, you're mentioning that quote books and gift books don't sell, and I think this is an awesome gift book, right? You should get a few copies and hand it out to your friends. So good stuff. Hey, Mark, coming up, it's one of the events we do not miss every year. In addition to the fact that you teach at the college level and help instill good ideas into new minds, and you write this incredible newsletter and all of your published books, once a year you hold a big, awesome, fabulous event where you invite a bunch of incredible speakers, and it's called FreedomFest. It happens in July in Las Vegas, Nevada. Tell us what is on the docket for this year's Freedom Fest.
Well, our theme is one that I think is really very powerful, and that is, are we entering a brave new world? It's based on a book by that title, Brave New World, back in the 30s. And, it's one of those topics that I think is really applicable because in so many ways we're entering that brave new world. And we're also entering a new roaring 20s. With technology and AI and so on. We're going to have sessions on that. We're going to have a debate on Bitcoin with John Mackey of Whole Foods and Alec Green of the Oxford Club are going to be debating some people who are very bullish on Bitcoin. I'm certainly in that category. I'm bullish on Bitcoin as well. We do have a 3-day investment conference there, but it's really a Renaissance gathering. There's something for everybody there. We have the Anthem Film Festival that my wife runs, first run movies that are really interesting and shorts and documentaries and that sort of thing. Very popular.
Well, and not only do you get to see the movies, but many times the producers, directors, some of the actors are actually in those sessions.
Well, that's right. Joanne puts together a great panel after each presentation, and she gets a big turnout for these films. We also talk philosophy and history and geopolitics. We've had Donald Trump. We've had Vivek Ramaswamy. We've had Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He may show up again this year because we are doing a presidential debate, but with the minority candidates rather than Joe Biden and Donald Trump. They'll have their own debates, so we want to have something a little bit separate. We have Ice-T, the actor on Law and Order, and a rapper. So that's pretty creative in that sense. We have Lord Matt Ridley, who is really an expert on innovation coming from the UK. We have Steven Pinker, the Harvard psychologist and linguist, who's written a book called Enlightenment Now, and talking there in that respect. I mean, we've got Steve Forbes. who's written a book on inflation, very relevant. We have Robert Kawasaki, who you know very well, is coming to Freedom Fest for, I think, the third or fourth time. So
Yep.
he really likes Freedom Fest.
It'll be great to hear from him. And, speaking of presidents, you have just announced that the president of Argentina is going to be a speaker. This is a popular guy people want to hear from, Mark.
This is really big news, and it took us a long time to get it, but we have just confirmed that Javier Milei, the new fiery libertarian president of Argentina, this man is transformable. He may transform all of Latin America if he can succeed in converting the Peron to doing the opposite of the Peronistas were basically pro-union, authoritarian, nationalistic, protectionist, high taxes, and their biggest export was capital, flight capital, leaving Argentina. And it's tragic because 100 years ago, they were one of the top 10 countries in the world in terms of prosperity. So Milei is trying to bring back prosperity to Argentina by slashing away at wasteful spending. He's laying off thousands of workers who really are being paid on the dole, in essence. He's deregulating the economy. He's cutting taxes. He hopes to dollarize. This guy is really fascinating. And in fact, we did a survey of our attendees and said, who do you really want to hear? And Milei was number one. He was ahead of Elon Musk. He was ahead of Donald Trump. So we were delighted that he accepted. He's heard of Freedom Fest and has been a big fan and wants to speak to her. So that made all the difference. And so Milei is coming and he'll be speaking. Our dates are July 10th through the 13th, and we are at Caesars Forum Convention Center. This is a new convention center right behind Harrah's. So it's not at Caesar's Palace per se. A lot of people might be staying there, but the convention center is close by and it's right in the center on the Strip. So we think we're going to have a record crowd of over 2,000, maybe even 3,000 people because of Milei and the excitement that's building around him. So if people go to freedomfest.com and get all the information, and we have a fairly inexpensive, most conferences are $1,000, $1,500 and stuff like that. Ours is under $500 for the entire conference. So I do hope people, I know you've been there many years and you're on Radio Row and it's a great place to interview people. I mean, we have C-SPAN Book TV there. And this year with Milei coming, we'll probably have major media all over the world coming. So it's historic in the sense that when Donald Trump showed up on 7/11 in 2015, he had just started his campaign and he was actually declining in the polls, but it was standing room only when he spoke at Freedom Fest. I don't know if you were at that session or not, but
we sure were. And afterwards in the press conference, and we got to ask Mr. Trump a question. We had just had him on our show a few months before, and he had not announced that he was running. And then he announced, and he came to Freedom Fest. So we got to have him on the show twice in a short period of time. But,
we were shocked because his polling numbers completely turned around that day because he was on nationwide TV repeatedly from the Freedom Fest event. And so we're taking full credit or blame for Donald Trump's career.
Well, I'll tell you, Mark, the thing I love about Freedom Fest, and you've hit on this, but it is so diverse. The debates are amazing. So all respectful, but fun and sometimes fiery debates. The mock trial, that's been a ton of fun. The exhibit area is great. You can meet all kinds of folks. You have an incredible bookstore, which, people can get books anywhere, but a lot of the authors that are there get a chance to grab the book, get it signed, get a photo. I've got lots of signed books from Freedom Fest over the years. For us, it's great. We always, that's where we've interviewed Steve Forbes Forbes on our show 4 or 5 times, and it's always been at FreedomFest. So I couldn't recommend it more highly. And you know what? If you decide, hey, you know what, this isn't even the conference for me, you're going to be in Las Vegas. You're going to have a good time. So we'll be there. It's July 10th through the 13th. You can get all the details. And if you want to know about what the real estate guys are going to be doing there, just send an email to freedomfest@realestateguysradio.com, freedomfest@realestateguysradio.com. Get your tickets, and we'll see you there. Well, Mark, we're at an interesting time with all the markets at such a high. What is an investor to do? I know there's that human nature part that when I think, my gold is at a high and my stocks are at a high, some folks want to just, put their head in the sand or sell off. You've been here before. What advice do you have when markets are trending higher?
Well, it's funny because in the Maxims of Wall Street, we have 2 contradictory quotes. The first one says, the hardest thing in the world to do is hold on to your stocks when the market's going down, right? And that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But then Jim Dines, he says, the hardest thing in the world to do is to hold on to your stocks when they're hitting all-time highs, because you think, wow, it can't go any higher, so why not sell at the top? Diversification is so important, in my opinion. You should have some of your assets in real estate, some of your assets in stocks and maybe bonds. I'm not a big fan of bonds. I'm more a fan of high dividend paying stocks rather than bonds. But gold and silver, oil, real estate, I have a diversified portfolio in my newsletter. Right now, for example, the stock market is going in through a correction. Who knows how long that's going to last? But meanwhile, gold and silver continue to move higher. Oil continues to move higher. Commodities in general. We haven't mentioned uranium, but uranium is a great market. Copper. We're recommending uranium. We're recommending a copper stock. We're recommending gold and silver. These commodities are just really entering a new super cycle, if you will. And I think real estate is part of that. So you diversify. You don't have, I don't like anyone who says, well, I sold everything and I put all of it into gold or into cash. Or into stocks. You need to diversify is my recommendation. As you're a young person, to make it, you concentrate. To keep it, you diversify. That's a quote from the Maxims of Wall Street.
Good stuff. All right. Well, I certainly look forward to seeing you in person in July at Freedom Fest, and we appreciate you being back on the show, Mark.
Robert, it's a real pleasure. Let's do it again.
There's Dr. Mark Skousen. Hang out with Mark and the real estate guys and Steve Forbes and a whole bunch of awesome folks at Freedom Fest. It's July 10th through the 13th in Las Vegas, Nevada. Just send an email to freedomfest@realestateguysradio.com for all the details. You're tuned to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms.
Live nationwide. You're listening to the Real Estate Guys. Find out more at realestateguysradio.com.
If you love real estate and have always wanted to own your own business, listen up. The Real Estate Guys and their panel of experts want to teach you how to go full-time fast in the real estate syndication business. These next few years may go down in history as one of the best times ever to acquire investment real estate. There are deals everywhere if you know where to look and how to assemble the resources. The Secrets of Successful Syndication seminar will show you how to make big money doing big deals from a team of experts that have syndicated projects totaling more than $1 billion. Don't wait for someone to give you a raise or create a job for you. Attend the Secrets of Successful Syndication and learn how to build a team, raise capital, find deals, and make full-time money in 6 months or less. Go to realestateguysradio.com and click on events. All the big players use syndication as a way to diversify risk, optimize profits, and earn big money. You can too. Go to realestateguysradio.com and click on events.
As I speak, inflation is robbing you at a rate north of 10%. Last year, the number one zip code that Mid-South homebuyers offered income property to Real Estate Guys listeners in appreciated by 21%. To harness that spread and protect and grow your wealth in the current economic storm, you need the 2 decades of experience in renovation and management that Mid-South homebuyers brings to their investors. Every home Mid-South offers you will have brand new components, a new 30-year roof, and a high-quality renter, all in a price range under $150,000. Their empathetic property managers will use your ROI as their North Star, while the lack of repairs on their totally renovated properties contributes to their almost 4-year average renter stay and 99% occupancy rate. Learn about their lifetime occupancy guarantee and total 1-year maintenance guarantee by emailing midsouth@realestateguysradio.com. That's midsouth@realestateguysradio.com. You'll be glad you did.
Hi, this is Mauricio Raul, the founder and CEO of Muir Law Group, and you're listening to The Real Estate Guys.
And welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio program. You ever thought about investing overseas? Well, come check out offshore real estate with training wheels. In the beautiful country of Belize, you can join me for 4 fabulous days in Ambergris Caye, Belize, where we'll take a look at the real estate market, understand what's making it go crazy, and spending lots of time over meals chatting about all things real estate. You'll find the details on our website at realestateguysradio.com under the tab that says Events, where you'll see the Belize Discovery Trip. Well, my goodness, it was so good to hear from Dr. Mark Skousen. I'll tell you what, the first time I met Mark was many years ago at the first FreedomFest that we went to, and he did a pre-conference session, and I had no idea this was going to be Dr. Skousen actually teaching, but he did 3 hours on the difference between Austrian and Keynesian economics. Now, you may understand that and you may not. I really didn't. I'd studied a little of it as a business management major in college. But in that class, Mark was masterful, and I recognized what a great teacher he is. And of course, that's what he's been doing for many, many years. He writes his newsletter, he's got his investment services, but he teaches and he has a real heart for young folks. It's why when you go to FreedomFest, you'll see so many of his students and past students there, because he really wants to focus on imparting knowledge to the new generation. So I'm going to be at FreedomFest. It's going to be a ton of fun. It always is. It's the middle of the desert in July, but we spend most of the day in the hotels and the conference centers and getting to know each other and network, and the lineup is absolutely amazing this year. If you want details on how you can join me at FreedomFest, just send an email to freedomfest@realestateguysradio.com, freedomfest@realestateguysradio.com. As a real estate investor, we do need to keep our eye on the bigger picture, and we've done that for the last couple of weeks, so we'll shift gears and get back into full-on real estate next week. But I would urge you to just look at your portfolio and decide, how do I shore it up? How do I make sure that I'm prepared if things go well, and I'm protected if they don't? And I hope that Mark Skousen gave you some ideas about that today. Hey, before we get out of here, it's time for this week's edition of Market Spotlight. Well, it is time for another edition of Market Spotlight on the Real Estate Guys radio show, where we take a look at a particular real estate market. And today we've got one you might not have heard of. To tell you about it, here's our friend Randy Hubbs. Hey, Randy.
Hey, Robert.
Hey, I wanted to find out about what's happening in a market that you know well. You live there. You taught band there a lot of years. And it's kind of a sleeper market in a way, and that's the Tri-Cities area of the state of Washington. Tell us, first of all, what is Tri-Cities?
Sure. Tri-Cities is 3 suburbs without a big city in the middle, but we're already hitting critical mass at around 300,000 population. It's 3 cities, Richland, Kennewick, and Pasco.
And there's an airport. I've flown in there myself a few times.
Yes, we have several airlines coming in now. Matter of fact, you'll be happy to know American just came in, but Alaska Airlines is there, Delta, and United.
It's been one of the things that helps us understand a market is airlift is huge. And I think the first time I flew up there was maybe only 2 airlines, but to see more coming and just talk about what happens in the marketplace. Who are the people there? What are the industries and so forth?
Sure. Well, the unique thing about the Tri-Cities, it's located, first of all, down in the southeastern part of Washington, and where the Columbia River, where the Snake River merges into the Columbia River. So there's a lot of water there, a lot of recreation. And what really got it all started, it was there was nothing out there for years. During World War II, they needed another location for the Manhattan Project. So this is where the Hanford Nuclear Reservation was created, that created the plutonium for the second atomic bomb. So that sounds a little ominous, but believe me, it's also have been a recipient of the Grand Coulee Dam project that dates back to the 1930s. So now what used to be desert is irrigated farmland, very lush We have wineries, a ton of wineries up the Yakima Valley that are getting noticed worldwide now, and lots of tech industry due to the Hanford project. We've got a large number of people that have come in, scientists and tech, and so the place is growing. And of course, we're on our third generation there now, so we're seeing a major population expansion and a housing shortage there.
Well, it's one of the things we always talk about is net immigration, people leaving, people arriving. But you have an interesting situation because of kind of the age of the population. There are people who are leaving, and yet there's also new folks coming. It's a pretty affordable area. Talk about the migration patterns that you're seeing.
Yeah, well, first of all, we've got a nicer climate typically in the state. We don't have the rain that the west side has. There's a lot of, say what you want to say about politics, but there's been a migration away from the west side, I think partly due to people wanting to get to a place that's less populated, because it's the freeway system on the west side has gotten to where traffic is pretty rough. So we see a lot of migration coming from the west side, as well as people coming in for a lot of the other industries that are emerging there as well.
And it's a pretty good employment base. And because of that, you have people that are relocating. Talk about the prices of homes and give listeners an idea of what things go for.
Sure. Well, of course, it's gone up everywhere, including the Tri-Cities. And I'd say we're looking now, average pricing on houses, 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, you're going to see usually in the mid-3s moving into the mid-4s. And then, of course, it goes up from there. But I was on the MLS not that long ago looking for anything for $250,000 or less, and it just didn't exist unless you had a single wide trailer on a rented lot. So
yeah, like everywhere. Well, you've developed a really interesting niche. You've been a broker in the area a while. You've been an investor even longer than that. But you and your wife, Jana, have both been in education your whole lives, and you've got this really cool niche. We don't have time to go into the details, but give us the nickel tour, because I want to get you both back on the show to talk about this really unique angle for real estate investors.
Sure. Well, we were both teachers. I was a band director. I taught at Pasco High School for 8 years and Columbia Basin College for 28 years. But my wife was a special ed teacher that quickly became an administrator and was the director of the Pasco School District, special services for Pasco School District. And so she saw the full gamut, and we were inspired by Josh and Lisa Lannon back in 2012 on the summit. Their book, The Social Capitalist, led us to decide to take our real estate experience and our teaching experience and create a course called Solving the Special Needs Housing Crisis in the U.S.
It's a fascinating topic. We'll get you back on the show so we can delve more into that. But we appreciate you sharing with us the Tri-Cities area of Washington today. Thanks, Randy.
Thank you.
There's Randy Hubbs. You can meet Randy and his wife, Jana, on the 22nd Annual Investors Summit at Sea. Stay tuned as we continue to bring you intel from markets around the globe. A big thanks to Mark Skousen for joining us today and sharing some non-real estate perspectives, although he's also a good advocate for real estate, as you heard. If you'd like to find out how to sign up for his newsletter, forecasts, and strategies, and what the real estate guys will be doing at FreedomFest, get all the details by sending an email to freedomfest@realestateguysradio.com. We've got a bunch of awesome interviews lined up. Can't wait to share those with you, including one with Randy Hubbs talking about special needs housing. But next week, front and center real estate with a great guest. Until then, go out and make some equity happen.
This episode of the Real Estate Guys radio show is brought to you by Paradigm Life. Powerful cash management strategies using life insurance. Learn more at beyourbank.com. Mid-South Home Buyers, low-cost, turnkey cash flow properties in Memphis, Tennessee. Corporate Direct, asset protection strategies for real estate investors from attorney and Rich Dad advisor Garrett Sutton. Find these and other great companies under the Resources tab at realestateguysradio.com. To learn how you can expose your product or service to the Real Estate Guys audience, call 888-489-7723 extension 4. That's 888-489-7723 extension 4. Or use the feedback page at realestateguysradio.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week right here on the Real Estate Guys Radio Show.